Thanks for tuning in to the Jurassic Park cast, the Jurassic Park podcast where guests chat with me about Michael Crichton's 1990 novel Jurassic Park. And also not that too.
I'm so sick of it all.
A big shout out to Christoph Oakes of Snail, and a big thank you to him for letting me use his band's music to score this podcast, and you can find his music on Spotify and Bandcamp. Today's intro is from the song Toucans from Snail's second album Charlemagne, and the outro is Hummingbird from Snail's debut album Snail. Please hear out this clip from episode 69, John Hammond, where I make the case that Lex Murphy, although the most despised character in the novel, is layered with a lot of symbolism. Hear out my argument, see if you agree, or at least see how this may have influenced Crichton while he was writing the book. Here's the excerpt. Alright, I thought I might take a stab at looking at Lex. Primarily, overwhelmingly, the biggest complaint about Michael Crichton's 1990 novel Jurassic Park is Lex. We get all kinds of complaints about Rex. People say things like she nearly gets her brother or Grant killed multiple times throughout the book, is just generally super annoying. People say, I honestly don't remember her doing anything useful throughout the book, and she never seemed to get any better either. People say, every time I re-listen to the book, I keep hoping there's a scene where she gets eaten. People read the book and they say, I know she's only 8, but even I don't think the average 8-year-old is that bratty. People say she was a brat, stupid kid who didn't understand how serious the situation was. People say, I swear in the Jurassic Park novel, Lex is so damn annoying and undeniably stupid. People say, so many moments in the book where I just want to slap some duct tape over her mouth. And one person said, I just reread the book and my God, I know she's only 8, but if she asks to play pickle or cries one more damn time, I'll feed her to the raptors myself. Yeah. Lex Murphy, not a great character. She sticks out from the novel above all the other characters. Crichton was intentionally doing something with her, and successful or not, it sticks out loudly. It's so loud, it begs to be better understood. So I look more closely at the text to uncover what Crichton was saying with this character. And here's what I found. I'm calling this Lex and the Big Rex. Lex and Big Rex have a symbolic partnership in Jurassic Park, which shows that only after losing a series of father figures can Lex find the strength to face the fear and uncertainty of her parents' divorce, which is symbolized by the Big Rex. She got to face the Big Rex, just like she's got to face her parents' divorce. Their parents are getting a divorce. The divorce of Lex and Tim's parents is an important aspect in how Crichton writes and characterizes Lex and Tim. Lex and Tim's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Murphy, are getting a divorce, and the benevolent John Hammond has brought them to Jurassic Park to join the safety inspectors and brighten up the kids' miserable lives with a fun weekend. Quote, their parents are getting a divorce and I want them to have a fun weekend here, says John Hammond on page 92. This was admittedly duplicitous by Hammond, as it's made clear on page 383, quote, Hammond had only brought them because he thought it would stop Gennaro from destroying the resort, but Gennaro was going to do it anyway. But the divorce is true, even if Hammond's intentions were not. As we meet Lex and Tim for the first time on page 92, after learning about the divorce, we also learn Tim is a, quote, bespectacled boy of about 11, and Lex is a girl a few years younger, perhaps 7 or 8, her blonde hair pushed up under a Mets baseball cap, and a baseball glove slung over her shoulder. In this way, we get Tim, who wears glasses, which probably is attached to his love of computers, thus he is a computer nerd who wears nerdy glasses, and Lex, the Mets fan with a baseball mitt. They're immediately presented in the binary of nerd versus jock, though not explicitly. This is very subtextual. Tim isn't really ever outlined as a nerd, but the glasses and computer science and antagonization from her father and sister, who are sports fans, encourages this interpretation. So bully versus nerd. The power structure between Lex and Tim is weighted against Tim, as Lex has her father's authority and preference on her side. Thus, the bully is even more powerful than usual, and that power is symbolically visible by the baseball mitt Lex carries with her. We can see on page 134 that Lex and the mitt are something Tim is eager to get away from. Quote, Tim watched as Grant Sattler and Malcolm got into the first Land Cruiser with the lawyer Gennaro. Tim looked over at Lex, who was standing pounding her fist into her glove. Tim pointed to the first car and said, can I go with them? I'm afraid they have things to discuss, Regis said. Technical things. I'm interested in technical things, Tim said. I'd rather go with them. Being interested in technical things or nerdy stuff doesn't get Tim a reprieve. He'll be stuck riding with Lex, and with the disapproval and ugliness that his father represents, making smacking sounds with each hit of Lex's fist into the leather glove. Tim was hoping to escape into a delightful land of dinosaurs, into a dream come true, but this overbearing shadow of his father is still here, in this park, right at his side, all along the way. No sooner are the kids introduced, they join the tour, and their relationship is put on full display. Lex snickered. Daddy says Tim has dinosaurs on the brain, she said. This is the jock bullying the nerd, an interpretation encouraged by Lex's next statement. Dad says dinosaurs are really stupid. He says Tim should get out in the air and play more sports. Tim feels embarrassed, and I believe he says this meekly. I thought you had to go. Hoping to remind his sister that she had to go use the washroom. Perhaps might leave them for a little while. So the characters are set up as the jock who bullies the science nerd, and in this case, the bully is doubly strong, employing the jeers of both Lex and her daddy, too. The corroboration between Lex and Mr. Murphy is strengthened by Tim's anecdote of visiting the American Museum of Natural History. Tim's dad says, I've never seen anything like it. You really do have dinosaurs on the brain. But we're told after this, quote, his dad wanted to catch the last half of the Mets game on TV, and Lex said she did too, so they left the museum. And Tim didn't get to see any other dinosaurs, which is why they had come to there in the first place. But that's how things went in his family, on page 95. How things used to happen in his family. Tim corrected himself. He thinks, this brings us to the concept of change, or rather the fear of change. Fear of change. Tim acknowledges that with his parents' divorce, he's not sure how things are going to change. Quote, now that his father was getting a divorce from his mother, things would probably be different. His father had already moved out, and even though it was weird at first, Tim liked it. He thought his mother had a boyfriend, but he couldn't be sure, and of course, he would never mention it to Lex. Lex was heartbroken to be separated from her father, and in the last few weeks, she becomes so obnoxious, on page 95. This parallels the fear of change that Malcolm and Grant discuss earlier in the novel when Hammond reveals that Jurassic Park is now cloning dinosaurs. Quote, Grant shook his head. It's been discussed in the field. Many people imagined it was coming, but not so soon. Story of our species, Malcolm says, laughing. Everybody knows it's coming, but not so soon. On page 84. And of course, this is a greater theme in the novel, too. The idea that a dramatic paradigm shift and major changes imminently approaching. What kind of change? Asks Sally Sattler, Evie, and Malcolm. All major changes are like death, he said. You can't see the other side until you're there. On 314. In other words, facing an uncertain future with anxiety is a theme experienced by our heroes, Malcolm, Sattler, and Grant, and they share that same theme with Lex and Tim on a smaller, more relatable scale with their parents' divorce. Both the paradigm shift and the divorce are scary, uncertain futures for all of our protagonists. The major change is like death. You don't know what to expect, and that's scary. Lex is manifesting these anxieties as Tim reports. Quote, he thought his mother had a boyfriend, but he couldn't be sure, and of course he would never mention it to Lex. Lex was heartbroken to be separated from her father, and in the last few weeks she had become so obnoxious. So she's manifesting these anxieties by being obnoxious. So now we've got two kids who are scared of a new and uncertain future, who are orphaned in a way because their parents are not here on the island. But here at Jurassic Park, some characters become surrogates or foster parents to the kids. So the foster parent father figure, who is Regis. The first is a foster parent in many ways, a state-appointed guardian set to care for the children. In this case, it's Ed Regis, who John Hammond instructs to watch my kids like a hawk. They're your responsibility for the weekend, on page 96. Even though a foster parent, Crichton quickly co-opts Regis to serve as a surrogate father for Lex. First, when we meet Regis, it is said, quote, red hair appeared around the edges of his Mets baseball cap on page 2. Pair this with Lex's, quote, blonde hair pushed up under a Mets baseball cap on 92, and she and her father wanting to go, quote, catch the last half of the Mets game on TV on page 95, we find that Crichton has connected Lex, her father, and Regis together through their love of the New York Mets. Crichton strengthens this association that Lex, her baseball mitt, and her father are connected during the scene when the tour stops to visit the sick Stegosaurus. Everyone is fascinated with the mystery of this illness except Lex. This is boring, Lex said. Shh, Tim said. Dr. Sattler's trying to think. Unsuccessfully, Ellie said, walking further into the field. Behind her, she heard Lex saying, anybody want to play a little pickle? On 157. Beat for beat, this is the same as Tim at the American Museum of Natural History, looking at dinosaurs, and then the other Murphys get bored and opt to go enjoy baseball instead. A perfect parallel. At the sixth Stegosaur, everyone's enjoying the dinosaurs except the other Murphys, which just is Lex this time, and they go off and enjoy baseball instead. Further, Crichton is conflating Regis with Lex's dad, so Lex connects to Regis in a meaningful and symbolic way in this novel. This is supported by Lex asking Regis to, quote, play a little pickle, and he says, well, sure. And then they go do that on page 115, just as you can imagine Lex and her daddy played. All right, personifying uncontrollable force. This is all connected. You just wait. At this time in the novel, also on page 115, Crichton makes a declarative statement on the relationship between kids, parents, and dinosaurs. Quote, Grant liked kids. It was impossible not to like any group so openly enthusiastic about dinosaurs. Grant used to watch kids in museums as they stared open-mouthed at the big skeletons rising above them. He wondered what their fascination really represented. Here we are. He finally decided that children liked dinosaurs because these giant creatures personified the uncontrollable force of looming authority. They were symbolic parents, fascinating and frightening like parents, and kids loved them as they loved their parents. Well, I've chatted with guests about the validity of this statement. Kids love dinosaurs because it's a world in which their parents know nothing about. They can be the experts and tell their parents about dinosaurs. Dinosaurs can be the important, significant, scientific thing that kids now know about, and the parents don't. It may be one of the first times a child feels the power of knowledge by being able to say the names and details about a field of study of which their parents know nothing. You can correct your parents on pronunciation or how big the dinosaurs are or when they lived. Being correct and being able to correct your parents, that's power. And Crichton kind of shows this in the book. Crichton says, saying these complicated names was a way of exerting power over the giants, a way of being in control on 115. And recall, this is how Tim earns some respect, however briefly, from his dad, by identifying a detail in the Tyrannosaurus skeleton in the museum. And recall, too, he corrects his father about the details. His father looked at a skeleton and said, that's a big one. Tim said, no, Dad, that's a medium-sized one, a Camptosaurus. Well, I don't know, it looks pretty big to me. It's not even full-grown, Dad. His father squinted at the skeleton. What is it, Jurassic? Geez, no, Cretaceous. Cretaceous. What's the difference between Cretaceous and Jurassic? Only about 100 million years, Tim said. Cretaceous is older? No, Dad, Jurassic is older. See, Tim has the power of knowledge, and it's not making him love his parents anymore. As Crichton argues on page 115. So here's another moment that sticks out, just like Lex's awful behavior. What does it mean? Because that meant something. Crichton is laying bare the symbolism in Jurassic Park. Dinosaurs personified the uncontrollable force of looming authority. They were symbolic parents, fascinating and frightening like parents, and kids loved them as they loved their parents. That's a big, important quote. In this way, Lex loves her father because he represents looming authority and uncontrollable force. Lex feels that with her father on her side, her motives are righteous, and she feels protected, and she loves him for that. Because he's authority, and it looms, and it's uncontrollable, and it's on her side. But with her father moving out, she feels impending insecurity, and she's scared of an uncertain future. The new uncontrollable force, looming authority, and frightening future is one where her parents get a divorce, but also this is what dinosaurs represent. Grant just tells us that in this quote. Dinosaurs personify the uncontrollable force of looming authority, which is facing the truth about the looming new family dynamics. Facing the Big Rex is Lex facing her fear of the uncontrollable force of an uncertain future. So we've established that, 1, divorce is central to the characterization of Lex and Tim. 2, Tim and Lex are designed to represent a binary relationship between bully and nerd. 3, dinosaurs, and specifically Big Rex, personify the uncontrollable force and looming authority and are a symbolic parent. And 4, thematically, Lex and Tim face an uncertain and frightening future now that their parents are divorcing. So, when Regis abandons the kids during the Big Rex attack, the kids are abandoned by their father figure, leaving them desperate to make sense of a terrifying and uncertain world, one which is thematically addressed by Malcolm to be so unknown that we fear it as we would fear death, because we don't know what it's like on the other side. Abandonment. As the power goes out and the Land Cruiser stop, Lex, quote, sat nervously squeezing her leather mitt in her hands on page 182, as if for comfort from her father. Remember, the mitt is a symbol of her father's authority. But as she's searching for comfort, Ed Regis opens the Land Cruiser door and runs from the Tyrannosaur, disappearing into the woods on 184. He left, Lex said. Where did he go? He left us alone. Shut the door, Tim said. But she had started to scream. He left us! He left us! They're abandoned by Regis, their foster parent, left alone to face the dinosaurs, which represent their parents' uncontrollable choice to get a divorce, and Lex is terrified. After the attack, Lex is in denial, left hiding in a drainage pipe, banging her head and crying. Tim tries to console her, as he might have consoled her now that their family is splitting up. Look what I have, he said, holding up his hand. She stared uncomprehendingly. It's probably too dark for her to see. It's your ball, Lex. I found your ball. Is Daddy out there? No, he said, feeling strange. He's back at home, Lex. Is Mommy? No, Lex. Are there any grown-ups out there? Lex said. Not yet, but I'm sure they'll come. They're probably on their way right now, on page 211. She's in denial, the first stage of grief. She can't believe her dad isn't here for her. Shortly thereafter, they see Regis, the surrogate father, who abandoned them, and he's attacked by the juvenile Tyrannosaur right in front of Lex's eyes. Any hopes that their family may be reunited is symbolically killed in this moment, as the symbol of their family, Regis, is killed by the symbol of the uncontrollable decision to divorce, which in this case is an escaped tyrannosaur. Oh no, Lex said softly on 217. Surrogate father figure 2. Alan Grant. So once their father figure abandons them, we're left with Lex, Tim, and Grant huddled together to face Jurassic Park on their own. In this way, one could interpret Grant as the mother figure in what remains of the Murphy family, just like Lex, Tim, and Mrs. Murphy living together now that their dad has moved out into his own place in Mill Valley. That said, Grant doesn't behave like a mother figure. He's very much a new father figure, but one that's more closely aligned with Tim's sentimentalities. When Lex is tired, she asks Grant to carry her on pages 233 and 234. You're too big to carry, Tim said. But I'm tired, she said. Okay, Lex, Grant said, picking her up. Oh, you're heavy. On 233. And Tim and Grant build a relationship discussing fractured family units. Grant reveals that his wife has died, and he has no plans on getting married again on 234. And Tim relates how their mom has a new boyfriend, and their dad has moved out. Further strengthening the surrogate father role, when the threesome reaches a tall fence, Lex hands Grant her baseball glove, metaphorically passing the daddy symbol to Grant, so she can climb the fence on 237. And recall first, Grant said he likes kids on page 115, and second, one of Grant's primary character traits is that he's an expert on infants and juveniles, albeit infant and juvenile dinosaurs, but he has taken a keen interest in nurturing habits and parenting techniques, all the same, it's the same thing. He spent 2 years researching his paper, quote, with its report of a herd of 10,000 duck-billed dinosaurs living along the shore of a vast inland sea, building communal nests of eggs in the mud, raising their infant dinosaurs in the herd, made Grant a celebrity overnight. The notion of maternal instincts in giant dinosaurs and the drawings of cute babies poking their snouts out of the eggs had appeal around the world on page 37. So Grant is characteristically well-suited to adopt a surrogate father persona and is even handed the baseball mitt, which is a symbol of a father's authority. And then we find the fountain of dramatic conflict. Then Lex slips into a maintenance building, and the next morning she has begun to embrace a more maternal role, abandoning her childish one on 252. She's feeding Ralph, a juvenile triceratops. It's really more like a babysitting than a mothering, but more importantly, she's building a new relationship with the wild dinosaurs, which she was so scared of earlier. Symbolically, we can read this as her taming some of her fears of the divorce. But after everyone enters the park around page 250, Lex predominantly becomes a fountain-like source of dramatic conflict. Basically, anything that's suggested or decided upon, she disagrees with. No matter the circumstances, she's against them. And it's in this stretch out in the park that I believe most readers find their dislike of Lex Murphy. Lex wants to ride Ralph, but Grant won't let her on 253. When Grant wants to go trigger a motion sensor, she won't stay put for fear of abandonment on 254. When Grant scrambles up a tree during a hadrosaur stampede, she digs her fingers into his shoulder, refusing to climb any higher on 259. When Grant is observing the Myosaur from up a tree, she won't sit still and scares it away on 261. When he tries to get the kids to continue heading to the visitor center, she says, "No, I'm not walking out there anymore" on 262. When they sneak by the Tyrannosaur to get into the raft at the lagoon, she's stubborn about following instructions on 265. She has to cough at the wrong time while they're trying to float away undetected on 265. She reluctantly agrees to do as she's told as they escape the Big Rex by the skin of their teeth on 268, and she asks if they can eat mysterious berries, and she needles Tim for not being Dad's favorite at the same time on 274. Now I'm going to take a break from the listing of all of Lex's acts of dramatic conflict to identify a particular passage that illustrates two significant points in this essay. Lex sighed, dissatisfied with Grant's authority. Recall, he rejected her request to eat those berries. "I wish Daddy were here," she said. "Daddy always knows what to do." "What are you talking about?" Tim said. "He never knows what to do." "Yes, he does," she sighed. Lex stared at the trees as they slid past, the big roots twisting toward the edge. "It's just because you're not his favorite." Tim turned away and said nothing. "But don't worry, Daddy likes you too, even if you're into computers and not sports." "Dad's a real sports nut," Tim explained to Grant. Grant nodded. Up in the branches, small, pale yellow dinosaurs, barely 2 feet tall, hopped from tree to tree. They had beaky heads, like parrots. "You know what they call those?" Tim said. "Microceratops." "Big deal," Lex said. "I thought you might be interested." "Only very young boys," she said, "are interested in dinosaurs." "Says who?" "Daddy." Tim started to yell, but Grant raised his hand. "Kids," he said. "Shut up." "Why?" Lex said. "I can do what I want if I..." Then she fell silent because she heard it too. It was a blood-curdling shriek from somewhere downriver. And that's going to be the Cerrodactylus, the pterosaurs. All right, first you can see Lex obviously continues to be a tireless mechanism of dramatic conflict. But recall, when Grant says children like dinosaurs because these giant creatures personified the uncontrollable force of looming authority, on 115, here's an example of where Lex wishes her dad were with them because he's a force of looming authority. And he'd fight for Lex so she could eat those berries. Her dad's authority would act on her behalf, and she loves him for that. just as Grant says, and kids love dinosaurs as they love their parents. Second, perfectly in accordance with Grant's earlier quote, saying these complicated names is a way of exerting power over the giants, a way of being in control. In this moment, Tim is sharing the names of the Microceratops with Lex, to be read as Tim is looking to empower Lex, but she rejects it. She's still clinging to a world where her father hasn't left. Recall, the escaped dinosaurs represent the uncertain and scary world where their parents are divorced. The next scene is their trip through the aviary, where Lex is forced to surrender her Daryl Strawberry special, that beloved baseball glove that has represented safety and family and a looming authority that acts on her behalf, on page 281. So we can see which side of the argument Crichton is on. Better learn how to deal with divorce, kids. And the very next scene is Big Rex's head lunging through the foliage from the left, the jaws snapping at the raft. Lex howled in terror, and Grant paddled away toward the opposite bank, but the river was only 10 feet wide. The Tyrannosaur was caught in the heavy growth. It butted and twisted its head and roared, and then it pulled its head back, on page 282. She's got to face her fears, because Daddy isn't coming back. And remember, the Tyrannosaur, the Big Rex in particular, represents those fears. All right, the continuing itemization of Lex's proficiency at dramatic conflict. When Grant and Tim are trying to discuss frog DNA, she's needling Tim about being very interested in sex, on 282. After sneaking by the Dilophosaurs, they're approaching the waterfalls. She reveals she can't swim, on page 292, and she hasn't done up her life jacket yet. Great. After being resuscitated with mouth-to-mouth, she doesn't want to go back towards the waterfall and hide from a Tyrannosaur, on 294. And when Grant opens the strange room behind the waterfalls, she refuses to go in there with him, I guess because it was dark, on 295. But Grant does go in, and they are separated, and the kids are left alone. That brings us a final showdown. When Grant goes into that weird room behind the waterfalls, Lex's fear of abandonment flares up again. Understandably. Now she's left to confront the Tyrannosaur after being abandoned again. You can see how the Big Rex really does symbolize the kids having to face their fears about being left by their father. Her dad left her. Regis left her. She lost her glove. And Grant has left her. And she and Tim are left to face the Big Rex, a symbol of the scary and unknown world after divorce. She has to summon the courage to help save Tim, ineffectually. It's not her fault the Tyrannosaur is invincible to 7-year-olds. But they survive, despite the challenges. Perhaps that's the lesson here. And once the Tyrannosaur is gone, it's sort of the end of the analogy here. So what do you think? Did the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, especially the Big Rex, symbolize Lex's fear of losing her father in a divorce? Was Lex successfully characterized as resistant to giving up on her family and terrified to face a world where she hasn't got her father by her side, empowering her with his looming authority and an uncontrollable force? And does their fear of an uncertain future successfully parallel the greater themes of the novel, where our protagonists are worrying about paradigm shifts in a new age of biotechnology? Malcolm says all major changes are like death, and Lex faces death right in the mouth. Lex and Tim may not know what the future holds now that their parents are getting a divorce, but they may have developed the courage to face it head on, and they will do it together. And sort of, they do kind of save the day together. Tim and Lex poke at the touchscreen navigations to get Jurassic Park back up and running, and witlessly connect with the A and B to stop it from reaching the mainland. That's teamwork. It's a dysfunctional team, but it's teamwork all the same. It's not like the people at Jurassic Park weren't a dysfunctional team. So, there you go. They kind of saved the day. So thanks, Lex and Tim. Sorry to hear about the divorce, but I hope you had a fun time at Jurassic Park. Do you think with this in the back of your mind that it may make Lex a little more tolerable during your next reread? I suppose it doesn't matter if it does, but maybe this sweetens the flavor of the overwhelmingly most distasteful facet of the novel for you. Maybe not, I don't know. Alright, a big thank you to you for tuning in. If you're interested in more of the podcast, you can find it wherever podcasts are, and just look for Jurassic Park Cast, include those hyphens, or Jurassic Park Podcast. That might work too. And if you like the videos, you can like and subscribe and receive notifications when a new one is available. There's a lot more to come. Until next time.